And it's Tuesday evening live on ETV, 8 p.m. if you check your time, and it's now time for Fact Sheet. Tonight, we are talking about an issue which has been bothering all of us as Ghanaians. The dangers on our road, the fatalities, the number of lives being claimed, the carnage every day we hear of. If you go through the statistics and the data that is available, 2019 for instance, 6 people died each day as a result of road accidents. If you do the math, over 2,000 people died in 2019 alone as a result of road accidents. That's not to talk about the injuries that we had as part of the data and the statistics we had. Just last 2 weeks, Daily Graphic reported of how within 2 weeks we had 3 accidents that had claimed over 16 lives. Not again talking about the injuries that we incurred. There have been so many concerns as to why, after all the sensitization program that the National Road Safety Authority, the MTTD of the Ghana Police Service have embarked on, still we have the numbers going up. Again, going by the statistics and the data, from 2015 until now, the numbers have been going up today. If you check 2015, the crashes we had as a nation, 9,796. The number of deaths we recorded, 1,802. And the injuries recorded were 8,000. 2016, crashes were around over, let's say a little over 11,000. Deaths, 2,198. Injuries, over 10,000. 2017, crashes, 12,843. Deaths, 2,076. Injuries, 12,116. 2018, crashes, 13,645. Deaths, 2,341. Injuries, 13,677. 2019, crashes, 13,877. Deaths, 2,284. Injuries, over 10,000. 2020, the records, crashes, 12,100. Deaths, 2,589. Injuries, over 12,380. These are indeed very scary figures. Is it that we are not doing enough? Is it that we are not doing enough education? Is it that we are not training our drivers enough? What really could be the cause for these high numbers we've been recording over the years, starting from just 2015? Now, this has brought to the fore a conversation about a very controversial law which popped up in 2016 after it had been passed and rather got shelved in 2017 when the MPP administration took over, and which has to do with the mandatory road toll or towing levy or transport towing levy, accident cars towing levy, if you may put it that way. It was shelved. But many are saying that now would be the best time for us to have a conversation about the reintroduction of this law. Would the statistics support the call for us to reintroduce this law? Tonight, we are talking about the carnage on our roads and how we can deal with it as a nation. My name is Samuel Ishen. My guests are ready, and they would help me explore the various options that are available to us this evening. Stay with us. And you're welcome back. This is Fact Sheets live on ETV, also live on Facebook tonight, even as we deliberate on the matter of the carnage on our roads, the accidents, the number of deaths recorded, issues about Carnage, issues about the buses. Recently, the National Road Safety Authority brought out some guidelines as to how the big buses that ply our route intercity must conduct themselves, the number of drivers that are supposed to be on each bus, and the number of the travel distance they must go before they swap drivers, as to whether these things are working or not. The big trucks on our roads as well, where they park, especially in the night on the highway, taking almost all the road. All these things are concerns. And so my guest, Mr. Samuel Amwa, who is the National Welfare Officer for the GPRTU, is in the studio with me. So is lawyer Kwame Etuahene also here with me. He's the head of Regulations, Inspection and Compliance for the National Road Safety Authority. And we'll be joined on the phone line by Superintendent Alexander Obeng, who is the Director of Research and Training for the MTTD. Gentlemen, good evening.
Good evening, sir.
Mr. Tony, I'll start with you with some data as to the first quarter of the year 2021, what the figures are like in terms of road accidents on our road.
Well, thank you. So I think that the first quarter, fatalities for the first quarter, it's about 779 as compared to close to about 400 over the same period of last year. And that's where we are.
Okay.
If you look at that in that sense, it obviously creates a situation of discomfort. But we must bear in mind that for the first quarter of last year, most part of our country was under lockdown. So there wasn't much of traffic activity.
Okay.
But if you were to compare the situation to 2019, when the first quarter, I think the number of deaths was around 696. So you notice that without giving credibility or justification, you'd appreciate that there is an increase.
Yeah.
Nonetheless, the rate of increase is not very huge. It is not to say that lives that are lost could be justified. But you see, from 2019 to date, the reality of our situation also is that we have added not less than about 300,000 vehicles on our road. On the average, almost about 150,000 vehicles are registered annually.
Annually?
Yes. The reality again is that between 2019 and now, we may not, it's possible that we haven't expanded our roads significantly. Over the same period, I can imagine that our friends with MTTD who have responsibility to enforce the laws have kept a very constant number. Those of us at the authority and their likes. I make this point to emphasize that in as much as we are unhappy, it is also the case that without the little contribution that come from the related stakeholder institutions, I mean, in a do-nothing situation, the situation will be very worse. So we're trying to do the best we can given the constraints we have to keep the numbers down. But doing so, I acknowledge that there's a lot that we can do that we are doing presently, even within the limited constraints we have. I mean, if the police is as much committed, we can do a lot more enforcement of the law. Advocacy from our perspective, there's a lot more we can do than doing now.
All right.
The road sector agency is responsible for fixing the road. There's a lot that could be done, and I think that that's where we are. In our approach, you see, each time there must always be a synergy. So if there's sufficient education, for instance, without corresponding support from the enforcement wing, oftentimes you wouldn't get the impact that you require. So there's enforcement, there's education, but laxity on the side of the transporters or the road infrastructure agencies will potentially come to this situation. So we require that the various duty bearers, without leaving anybody out, must do more than they do at present in order for us to keep the curve down and see some significant improvement on our situation. Otherwise, yes, the data is good. It helps for us to plan, understand the nature of the problem, where these accidents are occurring, and what time of the day. But the other fact is that it is about 779 families across the country.
Indeed. Before you go to that point, at least you've given us a sense of the situation as it stands now.
Yeah.
And you made mention of an all hands on deck approach that needs to be applied in trying to deal with the problem of the carnage on our roads. I'll come to Sami and ask him, because most of the times when these accidents happen, the blame is laid at the doorstep of the drivers, be it the bus driver, be it the truck driver, be it the private driver who might be shuttling between Accra and Kumasi. And they say that especially for you, the commercial folks, you place money over lives. How do you feel most of the times when these accidents happen and that's how Ghanaians are thinking about you?
Thank you very much. Let me just use this opportunity to commend the leadership of GPRTU. And then yesterday, I think one of your colleagues called, and then they were still asking of the national chairman of GPRTU. So as I've had this opportunity, let me just come out. Currently, the national chairman is Nanani Makubresiama.
Okay.
Last year, August, we held elections, went for delegate congress at Kumasi, of which we chose new leadership. So Nanani Makubresiama is now the national chairman, and then Emmanuel Niankra happened to be the national vice chairman. Yes, as you rightly said, we normally feel very bad when situations like this happen, that accident will occur and everybody will be pointing fingers on drivers, because yes, it's the driver who was driving the car and the accident happened. So however, whatever the situation may be, they will say is the driver has caused the accident. But there are so many things that used to go into this whole thing. And then yes, most of the drivers, most of them do drive recklessly. Most of them don't observe the regulations on road and others. But there are some other things that we think we can also look at for us to see if we can bring down this.
What are these other things you're thinking about?
Yes, the other things, talking about, we all know, sometimes we stated that accident normally, overspeeding causes accident, and wrongful overtaking also causes accident, drinking and driving, fatigue and others. But then there is another thing, that is the roads, the nature of the roads also contribute to the causes of accident now. That is what we think. Yeah.
But the point about the roads, even if the roads are fixed and then a driver is still overspeeding, a driver is still drinking, a driver is still not observing the road traffic regulations, the signboards and all the indicators that are on the road, obviously I would have thought that the bad nature of the roads would rather inhibit the drivers from driving recklessly and rather not speeding, because the roads are bad. So it would compel you to drive slowly. So that should be an advantage to the drivers in terms of the overspeeding issue.
Yes, I mentioned that because we know we have a responsibilities, and these are the areas that we think the transport sector or the unions, we can do something about it. Talking about the overspeeding, we have a way of coming together to educate the drivers. And also talking about the wrongful overtaking, all these education goes into it. And then this drinking and driving at our various loading points.
How many times do you educate your drivers? How many times do you take them through refresher courses, whether with the DVLA or any of these institutions? How many times do you do that in a year?
Yes, in a year, basically it has to be by 3 times in a year. It has to be like that. But apart from that, we have our various loading points that we do, mobilize the drivers, call them to a meeting, educate them about, these things before they go on road.
Are there checks and balances for these drivers, as much as you might call them into your stations and talk to them? How do you ensure that the driver who is driving the bus with about, let's say, 25, 30 people in that bus is not going beyond 100 kilometers per hour? How do you ensure this?
Yes, as you're saying, we have a way of checking them.
How?
Like, supposing a vehicle has moved from maybe Circle and is going to Kumasi. there is this thing that we are trying to implement, because we find out that sometimes we educate them, they all know the speed limit that they have to go, but sometimes when they get to the road, they don't do what they are supposed to do. So now we've implemented something that we get some people to be at a various point to check, like maybe a driver has moved from Circle to Kumasi, maybe when the driver gets to maybe Linda Door or maybe Nkoko or whatever, we check as to the time from Circle to Kumasi. You understand? So by
but is that scientific? Because for instance, if between Accra and Suhum,
yeah,
the traffic situation is free, and that driver is speeding and going about 150, gets to closer to Lendador and now begins to observe, slows down and meets that 2-hour window you have given that driver, he would have driven recklessly from Accra to Suhum, endangering lives before he gets to your destination, though he would have met the window that you are given.
Yes, beside that, you know, when you come to the station on the ticket that we sell to the passengers, there are numbers, phone numbers on the ticket, and at the same time, you know, we do display our numbers, that even we do also advise the passengers in case something of that nature is going on the road. A passenger can just pick a phone and call, you know, the authorities or the station to report, you know, the attitude of the driver, and that is also helping. But at the moment, we don't have the actual mechanic to check, you know, this like the way we are supposed to do, of which we are hoping to get to that point. But beside that, these are some of the things we normally do for the passengers. Also help the executives of the station to know at least what is happening on the road, so that we can also know, you know, where to also come.
I'll bring you to the point about the introduction of technology into your business as transport operators, because I know for more than 10 years now, there have been tracking devices in the system. There have been the situation where vehicle operators can log the speed limit of the vehicles that are on the road. And so I wonder how over the periods, for more than 10 years now, you have not been able to introduce, as you know, transport operators, these tracking systems that can even immobilize cars and give you the speed at which a car is traveling. Why you've not introduced that? But let me go to the phone lines and speak to Superintendent Alexander Obeng, who is the Director for Research and Training for the MTTD, and pick his thoughts as to, from their point of view, what could be triggering these number of accidents we've experienced within the first quarter of the year. As Mr. Etuahene just informed us, over 700 cases that we have recorded. Superintendent, you're welcome to the conversation, sir.
Please, can you come again with the question, please?
Okay, so the question I was asking is, from the point of view of the MTTD, what is causing these road accidents that we thought from November or October thereabout that yourselves and the National Road Safety Authority embarked on vigorous campaign to ensure that we don't experience these situations we're experiencing today?
Thank you very much. I think that in an attempt to improve safety, there are always certain factors that we consider globally. And I know Ghana is not an exception, that with data available to us, we are all aware that basically there are three issues that interplay to bring about road crashes. I.e., the road environment, the vehicle, and of course, the human. And data have shown and experienced that the human error, as a result of our indisciplined behavior, contributes almost 95% to all road crashes and its associated fatalities. And the solution for these challenges are also not far-fetched. That vigorous road safety education is a critical component of it, and that's why you rightly said that in last year Ghana has been intensifying efforts in sensitizing more road users, be it vehicle owners, drivers or motorists, vehicle occupants, that's passengers, and those train footers, otherwise called pedestrians, who are mostly vulnerable, and all that under the banner Arrive Alive, which is in the right direction. However, I think that was not the only inertia to this challenge of road crashes. And that is why currently, in spite of all these efforts, I think the battle is still not won. And we see preventable crashes occurring and leading to about 771 Ghanaians dead within 3 months, and about 4,200 injured, with about, as a result of 4,009 crashes happening, which is over and above the same period last year. It is true that last year, around this time, COVID brought certain fear, so that many people were restricted. However, the increase is obvious even as compared to 2019.
All right. So, Lieutenant,
is the reason.
Let me ask this. Let me ask this quick question, which has to do with the data and the numbers you are giving to us this evening. Now, what does it suggest in terms of these accidents and their causes? Of the number over 700,000 that you have given us, how many of them were as a result of trucks or cars that were left unattended to on the road? How many of them was as a result of, let's say, overspeeding or drunk driving?
I was coming to that because with the fatalities I mentioned, clearly the specifics included, for example, the contribution from motorcycles, though fewer, but killed over 300. Though majority were private vehicles involved in crashes, killed less than 200. And commercial vehicles, though more than private, also killed over 200. So, and pedestrians also had their share. And the data is showing all the time about 11 to sometimes 15. It depends on the trend. Sometimes 20% of the fatalities being attributed to obstructions that are left on the road, including broken down vehicles, among others. But at this time around, the lead has been motorcycle, among others. So it is clear that though education is important, it is also important that we realize that the countermeasure that we deploy will always include other aspects of the countermeasure we talk about, including stringent enforcement, so that the importance of having a very robust, for example, towing system to deal with breaking down vehicles cannot be overemphasized. again, the issue of driver indiscipline that manifests itself in terms of excessive speeding, because the data shows that with the fatalities we have, if 100 people are dead, about 60 to 62 percent are always drivers involved in excessive speeding. So such behaviors are also contributing. These also manifest themselves in aggressive driving and tailgating, unlawfully overtaking on hills and in crests, and those who also overtake in column facing oncoming vehicles are all contributing, and the fact that others also negligently use vehicles in dangerous position without posting conspicuous devices.
All right. So,
are some of the issues that are happening again. So, the motorcycle management has gaps, the ownership and use.
All right. But I think that I want to chip in. If I could chip in a final question, Superintendent, which has to do with the point you made about the obstructions on the road and the percentage of accidents that we've had as a result of that. Would you therefore say that this makes it more important for us to, as a nation, have a conversation about the reintroduction of the vehicle towing levy? Hello, Superintendent.
Yes, sir.
Yes, I was asking the question that the point you made about the obstructions on the road, these vehicles that are left unattended to on the road causing accidents. Does it necessitate a conversation about the reintroduction of the vehicle toll levy, which was suspended in 2017?
I thought that so many people against it. Well, for me at the time, I was against it because there is nothing wrong as a vehicle owner to be levied among other vehicle owners who also have vehicles on our roads. Periodically levied, so that I wouldn't know when my vehicle will get broken down, so that the state will have prepared and might have entered into a contract with an entity that has capacity to remove such vehicles that get broken down unexpectedly on our road corridors, serving as traps, so that they remove it, whether I like it or not, free of charge, off the road, so that my car will not serve as a trap for unsuspecting traffic, thereby removing that obstruction and danger. That definitely was a good concept, but I believe because maybe inadequate explanation that I've caused it. Otherwise, that is the best option under the circumstances to lure Ghanaians to go into towing services and bring such vehicles and put them at various strategic locations where their services will be needed, so that any time my vehicle breaks down, they will quickly come in, remove it from the route corridor to allow free flow of traffic without fear, particularly at night.
All right.
That, I think, is very relevant. And if Ghanaians are still saying it should come, so be it.
All right. So,
because in the absence of that, I have not seen any towing service vehicle delivering any service for me. and I'm capable, I have money, and the vehicle is broken down. Nobody has those vehicles, and vehicles get broken down edges, and it is serving as trust. As I'm speaking, many nocturnal travelers on our road corridors as we are speaking.
All right. So,
if the strategy will bring towing service in Ghana, so be it.
All right.
And if government levies me when I'm going to register my car or periodically going to renew my route readiness, why not?
All right.
So
we'll end the conversation here. Superintendent Alexander Obeng.
Hello.
We're grateful you made time to join us tonight on Fact Sheet, even as we discuss the carnage on our roads. So, Kwame, he was trying to paint the picture for us, but I couldn't really get the figures so as to merit the consideration of the reintroduction of that law. What do the figures say?
Okay, so let me make the point that the bit about so there's been a discussion about reintroduction of a levy. I think that is not on the cards. Rather, what is on the table is a reintroduction of a project.
A reintroduction of the project. Okay.
But as to whichever form it will take, we are yet to have a look at it.
At what point is it now, and which agencies are involved?
Government suspended the project in 2017, and government through cabinet was very specific that the project should come back without the mandatory levy component, and also without a monopoly of the service provider. I'm aware that Honorable Yosaf Mafu at the time chaired a series of meetings that led to a review of the existing law. But the law was even suspended. And the current draft, as I have seen, does not include the payment of a levy. So we need to get that foundation straight.
Okay.
So that if in the course of the discussion, if we went to Parliament and it appears that we want to have a retake, then we'll look at it from that direction. But having said that, I think...
But which agencies or which stakeholders, this new conversation you are having, which stakeholders?
It's under the Ministry of Transport.
Okay.
And naturally, the Road Safety Authority is an implementing agency of the Ministry of Transport. So if the law goes through Parliament, I imagine that the implementation will sit directly with us.
I'm asking that question because, you know, Sami is here, and obviously they are also stakeholders. Sami, are you aware of this conversation that Mr. Tuahin is talking about?
What we heard was that they are now going to implement or bring in again the toll levy. Yeah, that is what we know.
That's why I'm trying to clarify.
Yes, yes.
But the point is, if they had been involved in that consultative discussions we were having, we wouldn't have these disparities.
That is one thing. We also have a little problem.
Fair, someone has just indicated that he took office a few months ago. I'm saying that when the project was suspended, Honorable Yasafumafo
was then senior minister.
Senior minister chaired a series of meetings.
Okay.
Is that okay? A series of
meetings. But obviously, their leadership would have handed over notes to them, and so they will be.
Of course, so
they'll be apprised of development
constraints.
Okay.
I mean, the fact that they didn't do that does not mean that it did not occur.
Okay.
I'm saying that a lot has occurred, out of which we have a draft regulation, which is yet to go to Parliament. In that piece of document, I haven't seen a mandatory toll levy.
Okay.
So it's not even in the cards to engineer this disagreement.
Okay.
You get what I mean? But to make the point that it is not a discussion about numbers. If we did that, we'll miss a point.
Okay.
As to what percentage of the crash necessitate. Yes, on the face of it, we know that between 11 and 20%.
Okay.
Of obstructions, of fatalities are occasioned by these obstructions. But the nature of what we do as Road Safety Authority, essentially we are risk managers. If I travel Accra Kumasi Road on a Saturday, I count no less than sometimes 100 of broken down vehicles in very dangerous sections of the road. I do not have to wait until calamity strikes before I begin to look at solutions. So I must think ahead of time to be able to act and fashion out strategies that will deal with that pending risk. So if we make that discussion, I think that was part of the issues with the first. if it is a case that, oh, how many of the accidents are happening because of this, then we'll miss the point. But rather, what is the nature of the threat? And in our bid, in a do-nothing situation, what is likely to be the outcome? The reality is that the police, which has the primary responsibility today, does not have a single tow truck.
Okay.
The last time they did, it was out of the benevolence of the authority. While we had some funding from the World Bank and we procured one. That was like 15 years ago. Today, if your vehicle broke down on a very dangerous stretch, and I will say that there are a number of times where vehicle owners, out of good conscience, have taken the trouble to want to take care of their vehicles, but their service is not available. So his vehicle breaks down, he goes to the police is unable to help. At the very least, the distance between where you can find a truck and the incident point sometimes is so much that the private sector person would want to charge exorbitantly. So in what ways could we resolve it? In our thinking, we said, oh, how, because of its capital intensive nature, what about introducing a scheme which will have everybody pay to provide encouragement for the private sector to go into an area where government does not find attractive? But somehow, I mean, that is history. So we've had to look at a new.
So in the new bill, what are the incentives for a private businessman to wanna go into this business if the first one was not incentive enough?
Yeah. So now I think that we need to open up the space. Any private person who is willing to get into that space would have to come, depending on your capacity, apply for a license. Just as anybody goes to buy an insurance, maybe you may be required to subscribe to the service. That is one. The other option may be that postpaid. So if you are distressed, you might have to look for the service on your own. If you find it, the rate of recovery would have to determine. Others have said that the state would have to find a way to regulate the fees and all of that. I'm unable to say as we speak whether that will be effective as what was contemplated before. I'm sure in the passage or in the fullness of time, we'll be able to make that determination. But that is where we are. I say this with a bit of some frustration. In this country, we have seen a lot of, with all due respect, a lot of pretense when it comes to road safety matters, which is that when the matter is hot, we pretend to be concerned, we have a discussion around it, and we all go to sleep waiting for the next major incident to occur. But in our bid to seek improvement, there's always been this culture of resistance. I'll give you two examples. One is the towing, which is very familiar with us. The next is a question of penalty units. So when the law was passed, I mean, we all know that penalty is intended to serve as a deterrent. The law was passed, a few of our colleagues were unhappy, we conspired against each other, we went to parliament, made noise, and the law was diluted. So about 90% of the penalty regime was taken out. So now I think that part of the concerns we have is that we have found a way to make these breaches encouraging. Because hardly is it the case that an offender of traffic offense ends up with a custodial sentence. It is often the case that you are fined, especially in cases where death do not occur. Broken down vehicle, for instance, in the last law, the offense for leaving, the punishment for leaving your truck unattended to without being told, you were to pay a maximum of 25 penalty units. 25 by 12 is how much? But if the service is inaccessible, and sometimes it comes at a cost, he's likely to elect the lesser evil, which is that, well, worst case scenario, if I'm prosecuted, I'll pay 300 Ghana cedis. Why must I bear the burden of paying 6,000 to tow my truck? So we need to figure out that as part of the conversation. The penalty regime, the disincentive for certain misconduct, it doesn't add up. And in a bit of trying to re-engineer this discussion, I'm thinking that is a very critical part of the discourse that must not
But lawyer,
stand.
is there interest in your deliberations by the private sector, those who may be in that industry, to even jump on board this whole new bill that you are thinking about, their willingness to, because it's capital intensive?
Yes.
Is that the interest at all
Yeah, there are a few
from
of
private
them.
businessmen to want to be part of this
A
project?
few of them. Let me make this point also. You see, at the last time, I think part of the issue was that there was just one company that predominantly was going to provide the service.
Mm.
The fact of the matter is that as of 2007, when we did that audit of all towing service companies in Ghana, it was only that company that had the capacity.
Mm.
In fact, if you put together all the towing trucks of all the other companies in Ghana at the time, they didn't even come up to a quarter of what this other company has in terms of capacity.
Mm.
So that was the state. It wasn't the case that as though someone was interested or some business had been cooked, if you like, for one particular person or so.
Mm.
But it is capital intensive. Not too many people are interested because it takes a lot of years to recover or recoup your investment. And if you are not so interested, trust me, people have said insurance. In fact, we engaged the insurance companies, and they said to us at the time, today I'm not sure, maybe their disposition will change, is that if somebody takes an insurance policy with SIC, and SIC is required to manage your risk when your vehicle breaks down, knowing too well that the service was unavailable, it will be unwise for them to take up the risk, knowing that in the event of their failing to do the needful, any consequences arising from the crash,
borne by them.
So they said no. And you couldn't compel them to do that. They were not willing to get into this business because it was expensive. And there were not too many companies available at the time. So like my friend Obin said, in our thinking, we thought that the best possible option at the time was that how can we make minimum contributions to provide the incentive for private persons to come in, knowing too well that if I invested 100 million, for instance, into this project, every year, all of us will make contribution of say 500 this year, next year, then over a certain length of time, that will be recovered. Otherwise, government should support. I mean, we've been very creative to retool the National Ambulance Service, for instance.
Well, somebody would say, we'll be going for a commercial break in a bit, but somebody would say that it is about thinking and it's about creativity. That, for instance, if a company opts to want to be engaged in this venture, it is for government